In the summer of 1817, the residents of the quiet port town of Gloucester, Massachusetts, experienced mass hysteria. Hundreds of people, captains of merchant ships, fishermen, respectable citizens, and even a judge, saw with their own eyes something impossible in the bay. A huge creature over 25 meters long, with a head like a horse and a body arching in vertical humps above the water. It moved like a caterpillar, raising and lowering the rings of its body, leaving a foamy trail behind. This was a sea serpent, and it changed the history of American science. The Linnean Society, a respected scientific organization of New England, for the first time in history created an official committee to investigate sightings of a sea monster. They collected sworn testimonies, documented, and analyzed. And then local residents found a small black snake on the shore with unusual humps on its back and declared it the offspring of the sea serpent. The society solemnly dissected the find and even gave it a scientific name, Scoliophis atlanticus. Only after the autopsy it turned out to be an ordinary snake, with tumors on its spine. The comedy ended in embarrassment, and with it, the trust in testimonies about sea serpents. But the question itself did not disappear. What did all these people see? Why did their descriptions match down to the smallest details? And most importantly, why do sea serpents continue to appear in eyewitness accounts 200 years later, although science has not found a single body, a single bone, a single convincing proof of their existence? Perhaps because we're looking in the wrong place. Sea serpents exist on a strange boundary between myth and reality. And this boundary tells us much more about ourselves than about any creatures that may be hiding in the depths. Today we will not chase proof. We will try to understand why humanity cannot stop seeing sea serpents, even when science says they don't exist. Because behind every testimony lies something greater than just an encounter with an unknown animal. It's an encounter with the most ancient fear of our collective mind. But here's what's strange. If sea serpents are just fiction or a perceptual error, why do absolutely all cultures talk about them? From the cold fjords of Norway to the Pacific coast of Canada, from the Mediterranean to the shores of America. Everywhere there is sea, there is a serpent living in its depths. The ancient Greeks knew it. The Scandinavians knew it. The Kwakiutl Indians on the coast of British Columbia told of it long before the arrival of Europeans. And the most eerie thing, everyone describes approximately the same thing. A long writhing body, a head rising above the water, movement resembling a wave or serpentine curve. This cannot be a coincidence. And psychologists have long known why. Carl Jung called this an archetype, a universal image living in the collective unconscious of all humanity. The serpent in water is one of the most ancient and powerful such images, because it symbolizes something fundamental, the primordial chaos from which the entire world is born. Remember Norse mythology. Jormungandr, the world's serpent, son of Loki, so huge that it encircled the entire earth and holds its own tail in its mouth. Its movement causes earthquakes and tsunamis. When it releases its tail, Ragnarok will come, the end of the world. This is not just a monster. This is a symbol of the infinite cycle, the boundary between order and chaos, life and destruction. In the mythology of virtually all peoples of the world, the serpent lives in primordial waters, in that state that existed before the creation of the world. Water is the unconscious, the dark depth of our psyche, where instincts, fears, and what we cannot control hide. And the serpent is the creature that dwells in this depth. When sailors in the 19th century said they saw a sea serpent, perhaps they really saw something in the water. But what they described was much more than just an animal. Their brains superimposed the most ancient archetype on an unknown shadow, the image of chaos sliding in dark water. We don't invent sea serpents. We project onto the ocean something that lives inside us. And as long as the ocean remains the last unexplored frontier on Earth, dark, deep, incomprehensible, this archetype will never disappear. But before we move on to how our brain reacts to serpents, we need to understand something important. Why specifically the serpent? Why not a shark, not an octopus, not any other sea creature became the universal symbol? Because the serpent is unique. It is the only creature that carries completely opposite meanings, depending on where it is located. On land, the serpent is a symbol of wisdom, healing, transformation. Look at the caduceus, the medical emblem with two snakes entwining a staff. This is a sign of healing that has been used for thousands of years. In antiquity, snakes were considered sacred animals of Asclepius, the god of medicine. Their venom simultaneously killed and healed, and the ability to shed skin symbolized rebirth and recovery. Shedding skin, that's what makes the snake special. It is the only creature that literally emerges from its own dead shell, renewed, as if born again. In the mythology of virtually all cultures, this became a symbol of eternal life, cyclicality, the ability to be reborn. But place the serpent in water, and the symbol darkens. The water serpent is no longer healing. This is chaos, not wisdom, but primordial force that existed before any order. Not rebirth, but destruction that precedes any creation. Jormungandr does not heal, it causes earthquakes. Sisyadal does not grant wisdom, its gaze kills. Water serpents in mythology are not helpers, but forces of nature. Uncontrollable, dangerous, something you cannot negotiate with, you can only survive. Why such a difference? Perhaps it's about the environment. Earth is our home. There we control the situation. A snake on land can be seen, avoided, even tamed. People have kept snakes in temples for thousands of years. But water is not our space. There we are blind, slow, helpless. A serpent in water is invisible until the last moment. It moves in 3 dimensions, can attack from below, from above, from the side. There it is, the master, and we are the prey. And one more aspect. On land, the serpent is a transformation of the outer shell. It sheds its skin but remains itself. In water, the serpent symbolizes the transformation of reality itself. It lives on the boundary between order and chaos, between what we know and what we cannot understand. Sea serpents are not simply aquatic versions of land serpents. This is a transformation of the archetype itself. They show how the same symbol changes depending on the element in which it exists. On land, the serpent can be an ally. In water, only an adversary. On land, it symbolizes life after death. In water, death itself, which precedes any life. On land, we can understand it. In water, only fear it. It is precisely this duality that makes sea serpents so powerful in our imagination. They carry both meanings simultaneously: creation and destruction, wisdom and madness, life and death. They are the living embodiment of how a symbol can turn to its dark side. And this dark side attracts us, because it reminds us of something we have forgotten, living in our cities and homes. That nature is not divided into good and bad. It simply is. Powerful, unpredictable, indifferent to our hopes and fears. Sea serpents are a reminder of this truth. And that is why we continue to see them again and again. But there's also a simpler explanation. Maybe our brain is literally programmed to see sea serpents? Think about it. What frightens a person at the deepest, instinctive level? Snakes. Millions of years of evolution taught primates to instantly react to snake-like forms. It's a matter of survival. Our brain recognizes the characteristic curve, the writhing movement faster than we can realize what we're seeing. And now add a second evolutionary fear: water. Deep water, where we are helpless, where we cannot breathe, where an unknown force can drag us to the bottom. Thalassophobia, pathological fear of the ocean, is one of the most common phobias in the world. And this is not accidental. For our ancestors, deep water really was deadly dangerous. Combine these two fears together: a serpent in water, thalassophobia plus ophidiophobia. It becomes a perfect storm of terror, encoded at the genetic level. But the eeriest thing is that the ocean gives our fear infinite space to grow. We have explored only about 20% of the world's ocean floor. The remaining 80%, absolute mystery. There reigns eternal darkness. Their pressure will crush a person in seconds. Their temperature is close to zero. And monsters really do live there. They just don't look like the ones we invent. Deep-sea gigantism is a scientific fact. For reasons still unknown, many species of animals at great depths grow several times larger than their shallow water relatives. Giant isopods, relatives of ordinary woodlice, reach 0.5 meter in length. Giant squids grow up to 13 meters. Scientists regularly find new species they didn't even suspect existed. So when a sailor in the darkness sees a long, writhing shadow under the water, his brain makes the only logical assumption: a serpent. A huge serpent. Because somewhere in the depth of millions of years of evolution, it is written, if it looks like a snake, run. And if it's a snake the size of a whale, run even faster. The ocean is the perfect screen for projecting our most ancient nightmares. Big enough to hide anything. Dark enough for any shadow to seem like a monster. And unexplored enough that science cannot say with certainty, there's definitely no one there. Maybe sea serpents don't exist in reality, but they are absolutely real in our consciousness, because the ocean provides them with the perfect place to live. But here's what really makes you think. When European navigators first reached the Pacific coast of North America, indigenous peoples had already been telling stories about water serpents for thousands of years. And these stories were much scarier than anything Europeans could invent. The Nuu-chah-nulth people from Vancouver Island called it cutla, a two-headed sea serpent with a body reaching 15 meters in length. This creature had two mouths full of sharp teeth and could attack prey simultaneously from two sides. According to legends, cutla was the mortal enemy of the thunderbird, a celestial spirit embodying the storm. When these two fought, the ocean boiled and the sky split with lightning. The Kwakiutl people told of Siziatl, a snake with heads on both ends of its body and a human face in the middle. Just seeing it meant certain death. But if a shaman was brave enough to touch Siziatl's tongue and survive, he gained incredible power, the ability to heal diseases, predict the future, even become invulnerable in battle. Only the price was terrifying. Shamans who underwent this ritual bled from every orifice in the body: eyes, nose, mouth, ears. Some died. Those who survived were never the same again. These are not just scary tales around a campfire. This was part of a spiritual system that existed long before Europeans appeared on these shores. The water serpent was a real force, as real as a storm or tidal wave. It was feared. It was worshipped. They tried to negotiate with it. And then the Europeans came and began to see exactly the same creatures in exactly the same waters. In the 1930s, off the coast of British Columbia, mass sightings began of a creature nicknamed Caddy, short for Cadborosaurus. The descriptions were strikingly similar to the legends of indigenous peoples: a long, writhing body, a head resembling a horse's or camel's, vertical movements in the water. Fishermen who had never heard the ancient stories described practically the same thing that Indians had been telling for centuries. This was not cultural borrowing. White settlers did not copy Indian legends. Most didn't know about them at all. They simply saw something in the water and described it as they could. Two absolutely different cultures, separated by centuries and oceans of misunderstanding, encountered the same archetype. The sea serpent lived in the collective unconscious of both, because it is older than any culture, older than humanity. Or is there really something in those cold Pacific waters that both cultures saw with their own eyes? The 19th century was the century of science and reason, an era when humanity believed it could explain and classify all living things on the planet. And when in the summer of 1817 hundreds of people in Gloucester began claiming they saw a sea serpent, scientists decided, it's time to deal with this superstition once and for all. Only the witnesses were not those easy to dismiss. These were not drunken sailors telling tales in a port tavern. Among the eyewitnesses was Judge Lonson Nash, a respectable citizen whose word carried weight. There were experienced captains of merchant ships who had plied these waters for decades and knew every creature living in them. There were fishermen who had spent their entire lives at sea, and they all described the same thing: a creature 25 to 30 meters long, dark-colored body rising above the water in vertical humps, as if a giant caterpillar crawling on the ocean's surface. Head the size of a barrel, resembling a horse's. Movements fast but smooth. It didn't swim horizontally like a fish, but moved up and down, raising and lowering the rings of its body. The Linnean Society of New England, one of the most respected scientific organizations of that time, took these testimonies seriously. They created a special committee, collected sworn statements, documented every detail. This was the first scientific analysis of a cryptozoological phenomenon in American history. And then something happened that turned a serious investigation into a farce. Someone found a small black snake on the shore, about 90 centimeters long, with unusual bumps along the spine. News instantly spread through the town. It's a baby sea serpent. Proof. Finally, The society solemnly accepted the find, dissected it, gave it a scientific name, Scoliophus atlanticus, the Atlantic crooked serpent, began writing articles, prepared a publication that was supposed to shake the scientific world. And only after detailed analysis did the truth emerge. It was an ordinary black snake, with tumors on its spine. The bumps were not a natural feature of the species, but a pathology, a disease. The scientific community exploded with laughter. The Gloucester sea serpent became a laughingstock. The committee was disbanded. The testimonies of hundreds of people were dismissed as mass hysteria. But 30 years later, something happened that could no longer be so easily ridiculed. On August 6, 1848, the British warship HMS Daedalus was returning from the East Indies. Somewhere between the Cape of Good Hope and the island of St. Helena, in the open ocean, the entire crew, including Captain Peter McQuay, observed something impossible. A huge creature moved parallel to the ship at a distance of about 100 meters. Its head and neck rose above the water by about 1.5 meters. Dark brown color. On the head was a mane, like a horse's or lion's. The body went underwater, but it was visible through the thickness. The captain estimated the length at a minimum of 20 meters. This was not a fleeting glance. The creature remained in view for about 20 minutes. It was seen not by one person, the entire watch crew, officers, the captain himself, trained observers, people whose job is to accurately record what they see. Captain Quay did what he should have, compiled an official report, detailed, sober, without emotions, just facts, what he and his crew saw. When HMS Daedalus returned to Plymouth, the report fell into the hands of the Admiralty, and there they faced a problem. Dismissing it was impossible. This is an official military document. Accusing of deception, impossible. Captain Quay was an officer with an impeccable reputation. Writing it off as an observation error. How can one be mistaken so detailed, over 20 minutes, when observation is followed by several pairs of eyes? Science was at an impasse. Denying the testimonies meant accusing hundreds of respected people either of lying or of collective madness. But accepting them meant admitting that somewhere in the ocean lives a creature that doesn't fit into any known category. The easiest thing was simply to remain silent. Not say yes or no. Leave the question hanging in the air. And that's exactly what science did. But the question itself didn't go away. What did all these people see? And yet sea serpents exist. They are real. They're just called something else. The oarfish, Regalicus glesn, is the longest bony fish in the world. A silvery ribbon-like body can reach 8 meters in length, though there are unconfirmed reports of specimens up to 11 meters. A red crest along the back, long fins, writhing movements. All this makes it look like a creature from legends. Most of its life, the oarfish spends at a depth of 200 to 1,000 meters, in eternal darkness, where pressure would crush a person. It swims vertically, head up, slowly gliding through the water column, like a living silver sword hovering in the darkness. People practically never see it. It inhabits another world. But sometimes, very rarely, the oarfish surfaces. And when this happens, sailors see exactly what legends have told for centuries: a long, writhing creature with a mane, moving in waves at the water's surface. Marine biologists believe that the oarfish appears at the surface only when it is sick, disoriented, or dying. A healthy fish never leaves the depths. That's its home, its hunting grounds. Therefore, each appearance is agony. The last hours of a creature thrown from its world into an alien, light-flooded desert. In recent years, such finds have become more frequent. In 2023, a giant oarfish was discovered off the coast of Taiwan. Divers filmed it alive, slowly dying in coastal waters. In February 2025, a rare video, an oarfish, still alive, washed up on a beach in Mexico. In October 2025, the first documented observation in the waters of Sri Lanka. Scientists explained the legend. Here it is, the sea serpent. A real creature. Everything adds up. Only here's the problem. If the oarfish explains all observations, why haven't stories about sea serpents stopped? People saw the oarfish live, photographed it, filmed it. Now they know exactly what this creature looks like. And after all this, fishermen, captains, tourists continue to describe something completely different. But here's what really makes you think. What if sea serpents weren't always a myth? Let's rewind time. 80 million years. The Cretaceous period. Dinosaurs dominate the land, but the real monsters live in the ocean. There, in the warm seas that covered what is now North America, Europe, Africa, swam creatures that perfectly matched descriptions of sea serpents. Plesiosaurs. Imagine a body the size of a small car, for powerful flippers instead of limbs, and a neck, an incredible neck, up to 3 meters long, crowned with a small head full of sharp teeth. When a plesiosaur surfaced, its neck rose above the water, curving like a snake's. Exactly like that, a snake-like neck above water, a massive body below water. This is practically an exact description of what sailors have seen for centuries. Plesiosaurs grew up to 15 meters in length. They hunted fish, rapidly shooting out their long neck like a spear. Their flippers moved synchronously, creating a smooth, wave-like motion underwater, that very motion that witnesses described as vertical humps. But that's not all. Mosasaurs, the true monsters of the Cretaceous ocean, up to 17 meters long, with enormous jaws full of sharp teeth and a body covered in scales. They swam by writhing their entire body, like giant serpents, exactly like crocodiles, only 10 times larger. Mosasaurs had a forked tongue, like snakes. They sensed prey's scent in the water, sticking out their tongue, tasting the water. These were apex predators, the T-Rex of the ocean. They hunted everything: fish, turtles, other marine reptiles, even sharks. Imagine you're sailing on a wooden boat in a Cretaceous sea, and suddenly beneath you glides a shadow, 15 meters of muscle, scales, and hunger. A body moving in waves. A long head with gaping jaws. A forked tongue tasting the water. A sea serpent. A real one. But they went extinct 66 million years ago, along with the dinosaurs. An asteroid struck. The oceans boiled, then froze. Food chains collapsed. Since 1932, in the waters of British Columbia and further south to California, more than 300 sightings of a creature nicknamed Caddy, Cadborosaurus, have been recorded. Descriptions vary, but common features repeat again and again. A body 5 to 25 meters long, a head like a horse's, camel's, or even a polar bear's, the ability to move quickly and dive. Scientists from the University of British Columbia, having analyzed the testimonies, came to a conclusion that sounds almost like capitulation. No animal known to science corresponds to all the descriptions. Skeptics say, these are just different animals: seals, sharks, eels, schools of fish mistaken for one creature. Or fish, sea lions swimming one after another, decomposing whale carcasses. But if this is so, why has the archetype remained stable for almost 100 years? The era of high-resolution cameras, drones, satellites. But the mystery is not solved, it deepens. The oarfish showed that legends can have a real basis. But it also showed that explaining one mystery generates new questions. Maybe we're looking for the wrong thing? Maybe the answer is not in what exactly is swimming in the water, but in why we continue to see the same thing, even when we know the truth? And now let's move to the waters of British Columbia. The 1930s. A wave of sightings begins that continues to this day. People see a creature. Again and again. Different people. At different times. In different places along the Pacific coast, from Alaska to California. And all describe approximately the same thing. A long body, from 5 to 25 meters, depending on the testimony. A head compared variously to a horse's, a camel's, or even a polar bear's. Dark coloring, reddish-brown, or black. The ability to swim quickly and dive sharply. Sometimes, vertical humps on the back. It was nicknamed Caddy, short for Cadborosaurus, after Cadboro Bay, where it was often seen. By the 1990s, more than 300 sightings had been recorded. 300 times. Over 60 years. This is not a single incident, not the error of one frightened fisherman. In 1937, fisherman Fred Wilson was returning home from Bowen Island when he saw a creature just 10 meters from his boat. He described it in detail: reddish-brown, about 5.5 meters long, a head like a polar bear's, large eyes, for flippers on the sides. Wilson was an experienced sailor who had spent decades in these waters. He knew exactly what seals, sea lions, sharks looked like. And this was none of those. In 1984, biologists from the University of British Columbia decided to analyze all available testimonies. Their conclusion sounded almost like an admission of defeat. The characteristics described by eyewitnesses do not correspond to any animal known to science. Skeptics put forward dozens of theories. These are elephant seals, large pinnipeds with a characteristic trunk. These are giant eels. These are decomposing carcasses of sharks or whales mistaken for living creatures. These are schools of fish swimming in a chain. This is an oarfish. These are several sea lions swimming one after another. All of this is reasonable. All of this is logical. But there's a problem. If catty is just misidentification of different animals, why have the descriptions remained stable for almost 100 years? Why do independent witnesses in the 1930s, 1960s, 1990s, and 2020s describe the same features? Collective hallucination? But hallucinations don't work that way. They are not transmitted from person to person across decades. Thousands of people cannot see the same non-existent object independently of each other. Mass hysteria? Possibly. But mass hysteria is a short-term phenomenon. It flares up and dies down. The Gloucester serpent of 1817 caused excitement for one season, and then everything subsided. Catty has been observed for almost a century. Cultural contagion. When people see what they expect to see based on stories they know. This explanation is closer to the truth. But then why don't catty's descriptions match the classic sea serpent from legends? A head like a bear's. That's not what was drawn on medieval maps. For flippers on the sides, not serpentine anatomy. The eeriest explanation was given by cryptozoologist Paul LeBlanc, one of the researchers of the catty phenomenon. Perhaps we are observing not one animal, but an entire population of creatures unknown to science. Rare, secretive, avoiding people, living in the depths of Pacific waters, where they are virtually impossible to track. Science rejected this hypothesis as unfounded. But the question remains. More than 300 sightings. Zero physical evidence. How can a creature be so visible and so elusive at the same time? How can it appear again and again over nearly a century but never leave traces? No bodies, no bones, no unambiguous photographs. Catty exists on that very boundary we talked about at the beginning. Between myth and reality. Between the visible and the invisible. Where science ends and something else begins. And this boundary tells us something important about the very nature of mystery. So why, despite all the testimonies, despite centuries of searching, have sea serpents not been caught? The simplest answer: the ocean is the last unexplored frontier on Earth. We know the surface of Mars better than the bottom of our own seas. Only about 20% of the ocean floor has been mapped. The remaining 80%, absolute mystery. At depths greater than 1,000 meters reigns eternal night. There is not a ray of light. The pressure is such that it will crush a person instantly. The temperature is close to zero. This is a completely different world, so alien that the creatures living there seem like aliens from another planet. And monsters live there. Real ones. Giant squids reaching 13 meters in length. Giant isopods the size of a cat. Goblin sharks with protruding jaws. Creatures with transparent bodies and bioluminescent organs, resembling living nightmares. Every year, scientists find dozens of new species they didn't even suspect. According to some estimates, about 91% of marine species are still not classified by science. So technically, yes, a large unknown animal could quite possibly be hiding in the ocean. Depth, darkness, vastness, perfect cover. But here's what's strange. If sea serpents are just a rare, undiscovered animal, why can't we detect it with modern technology? We have satellites, sonars, underwater drones, thousands of ships plying the oceans every day. We found giant squids that live at a depth of 3 kilometers. But a sea serpent 20 meters long that regularly surfaces? No. Maybe it's not about technology. Maybe we're looking in the wrong place. Remember everything we've talked about. The sea serpent is not just an animal. It's an archetype living in the collective unconscious of humanity. A symbol of primordial chaos from which the world is born. In psychology, the ocean is often interpreted as a symbol of the unconscious, the dark, unexplored part of our psyche. And the serpent is what hides in this depth. What we fear, what we cannot control. Chaos that is always ready to break free. Sea serpents exist on the boundary between the external world and the internal. Between the real ocean and the symbolic ocean. Between what swims in the water and what swims in our consciousness. That's why they cannot be caught. Because they are not just flesh and blood. They are a projection, a reflection of our most ancient fear, which we cast onto the dark surface of the unknown. Remember Odysseus? He did not defeat Scylla and Charybdis, the monsters guarding the narrow strait between rocks. He learned to sail between them, to accept their existence, to move forward despite fear. Sea serpents are our Scylla and Charybdis. They will not disappear as long as the ocean exists. As long as there is depth we cannot explore. As long as there is darkness we fear to look into. And perhaps this is right. Because a world in which there are no mysteries left, in which everything is explained, classified, and laid out on shelves. This is a world in which there is no room left for wonder, for awe before the unknown, for that primordial delight and terror that Captain Quay experienced, looking at the creatures swimming beside his ship in the open ocean. Sea serpents remind us, we have not conquered this world. We live only on 30% of its surface. The remaining 70% belong to something else, something ancient, something that was here long before us and will remain here after. And so, we conclude this dive into mystery. The sea serpent, born in the primordial waters of mythology, has swum through centuries and cultures to become part of our collective nightmare and simultaneously a symbol of nature's eternal enigma. From Norse Jormungandr to Indian Cutla, from the captain of HMS Daedalus to modern witnesses of Cady, its journey shows how myth evolves while remaining unchanged in its essence. We never got a definitive answer. Do sea serpents exist? Maybe. Is there a creature unknown to science hiding in the ocean depths? Quite possibly. Or do we see only what our ancient brain projects onto dark water? Also probable. But perhaps in this uncertainty lies the entire meaning. Maybe sea serpents exist precisely there, on the boundary between the real and the imaginary, between science and myth, between what we know and what we fear to know. And now, friends, a question for you. Do you believe in sea serpents? What do you think all these people saw, from the judge in Gloucester to the fisherman of British Columbia? Maybe you have your own story of encountering something inexplicable in the water? Share in the comments. Tell us what frightens you most about the ocean, the depth, the darkness, or the thought that something unknown may be hiding there. Let's explore these mysteries together. Don't forget to like if sea serpents captured your imagination, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next dives into myths and mysteries of the depths. See you on the boundary between the known and the unknown.